We're going to be joined by Susan Gapka, a longtime trans rights activist, and we're going to talk about Bill C-389. Now, Bill C-389 actually made it through the House of Commons, but because the election was called before the Senate was able to deal with the legislation, it won't be becoming law. And we wanted to talk about what I think is a very important human rights issue. Susan, thank you so much for joining us.
All right, Susan. Bill C-3PO, right? C-3P, what's the name of the
Bill C-389, introduced 3 times by NDP member Bill Sixkay in Burnaby Douglas. And just to share a little insight into how I feel is fighting for my rights, both provincially and federally, it was introduced by NDP member Sherry DeNovo. Both bills were introduced 3 times before we finally got the success we did recently with C-389. So it's a victory for trans people. It's a victory for human rights. And delighted to talk to you about it.
You know, Susan, I think we better go right back to the beginning. We're referring to it as Bill C-389.
C-389.
Let's tell everyone, what exactly would Bill C-389 have done?
Well, C-389, it's a trans human rights bill. It would amend the Canadian Human Rights Act to include both gender identity and gender expression. For those of you who don't understand what gender identity is, it would protect transsexual and transgender people, both in how we feel about our sex and gender identity as either male or female, and how people present. So transsexual people or transgender people are often born and assigned one sex, as I was growing up as male, and somewhere along the line it was very, very much discomfort, and it was such a discomfort that I transitioned to become, to change my name to Susan and live full-time as a female. However, there's a lot of harassment and discrimination I'll experience because of that transition, both for myself and thousands of trans people across Canada. So this bill would indeed protect us in employment, provincially in employment, and it'd be in federal institutions, so that's really, really important.
And I think, Susan, you mentioned the Human Rights Code. The bill would have also amended the Canadian Criminal Code with respect to hate crimes. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. I left that out.
And again, adding gender identity and gender expression, it was quite an elegant bill. It was very short, about 1.5 pages long, but it would have made these changes to protect people. As you mentioned in the opening, Susan, the bill actually made it through the House of Commons. It did pass its 3rd reading and was moved on to the Senate. You've mentioned Bill Sixkay introduced the bill, and a member of the NDP. Who was supporting the bill to enable it to pass in the House?
Well, even though, I did highlight the fact that the NDP introduced the bill and they're supporters of human rights, many, many Liberals, including Michael Ignatieff, voted in favor of it, was very supportive of it. There were some Liberals which opposed it, and one of the names that comes to mind is Alan Tonks. So if you're in favor of human rights, remember that if you're in that riding. There were a few conservatives that supported it. John Baird, for example, is one that comes to mind. But one thing that sort of upset us was many, many conservatives voted against it. Stephen Harper voted against it. And so that's one reason why I think it's great that we have a chance to vote on what our future government is.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. John, I do think John Baird does deserve some credit. He was one of only 5 conservatives that voted for the bill. The rest of the conservatives vote against it. And you've already mentioned Mr. Tonks. I believe Mr. McTeague is the other GTA area Liberal MP who voted against this bill and, if I may editorialize for a minute, voted against human rights. Susan, the bill has died because it didn't get taken up by the Senate. It won't be becoming law. Those changes aren't going to be made to the Human Rights Code and the Criminal Code right now. Does it matter in historical terms that the bill passed the House, or does it feel like a defeat because we weren't able to get it through the Senate?
For me, for many of us, it's seen as a victory. We were talked positively by all three parties, well, two of the three parties. The Bloc actually supported us almost unanimously, I think. And so, I mean, the idea that trans people were talked about as deserving of human rights protection in our highest parliament of government of the country is incredibly validating. For me, as an individual who's pursued this legislation for, what, 6, 7 years, it's the third time a bill has passed, so that's not the first time we've mourned the death of a bill. And there is only one option that we see. We see we're so close. We're just almost right at the over the top here, and there's only one possible scenario that will restrict us from getting this bill passed in the next government, and that's a Stephen Harper Conservative majority. They will vote against it. Any combination of Liberals and or Bloc or NDP, we feel that we have enough support to push it over the top. So we're just so close, but we're not there yet.
I just have a little update right here, if I might just. This is from ledgermarketing.com. They've done a recent survey. 37% conservative, 26% Liberal, 18% NDP. Matt Fodor, who's another co-host on this show quite a lot, he's contributing without knowing it because he posted it on his Facebook. He said it's pretty much the same of what we had before. To add to that, 29% of respondents would like to see a Tory majority, while 44% say that notion scares them. Just wanted to add that in there on that topic.
And as Susan mentioned, I think a Tory majority would mean something quite different for this legislation. Susan, a lot of people that I've spoken to support this change, but they support it as a symbolic change. I think it has great symbolic importance, and I agree that it does, but I thought maybe you could speak to us a little bit beyond the symbolic, substantively. What would these changes to the Human Rights Code and the Criminal Code mean to the trans community substantively, and moving beyond just the symbolic inclusion?
Well, I mean, it is symbolic and very validating and an important symbolism at that. Yet, what it would tell people that the state, the highest government, has said it's wrong to discriminate against trans people. That's a pretty clear message. And there will be remedies in place. It will also tell young people like myself trying to figure out who they are that the state has agreed that we're important and are included in society. And that's incredibly validating. And that you'd be protected. It'd be, federal employment, things like customs and passports. As I travel, what about body scanners? Think about me and body scanners. And so to know that I had protection as I traveled back and forth across the country on our airlines is incredibly empowering. The suicide rates of trans people are 80, 90%. There is some statistical data to prove that. It's just, and we're asking for the same rights that gay and lesbian people, disability women, other disadvantaged groups already have. So it's important, and it needs to be visible, and it needs to be explicit.
Thank you, Susan.
And any website or anything we can go to check out more? Sorry.
There is a new group on Facebook and a website. It's Trans Pride. I think it's .ca, but do a search on that. What we're doing is hoping we want to support candidates that voted in favor and discourage people from voting for those who oppose the bill. That's our way of contributing to the parliament, to the electoral process.
Susan, you've told us a little bit of your story just in the opening, but I wonder if I could ask for your personal reflection. How did it feel in February when you were watching the vote, when that vote came in, that you knew they had passed the magic halfway mark and the bill was going to pass? Just if you could give us your personal reflection.
Oh, it was incredibly powerful. Tears of joy. We struggled. The bill has died without even being debated. To be debated, and my name was mentioned and thanked a few times in the readings. For all the work. I mean, people who have known I'm going to be at a number of debates. Expect to see Susan and others at the candidate debates in this election, holding up the sign, just to be recognized and voting in favor, just gets us so close. I mean, it's not only important for me personally, but it's also important for our whole future generation.
And my final question, Susan, You've mentioned the importance of Bill Siskey in this entire process in being a champion within the House and moving the legislation forward. Bill is retiring. Bill's not standing for election again. What is the next step politically? Do you see another champion stepping forward within the House to champion this legislation, and who do you think that might be?
Oh my goodness, there's just so many champions. The messages we heard, on the Liberal side there was Hetty Fry, there was the other, I can't remember the other woman's name. Marlene Jennings were terrific. We got Megan Leslie, we've got Libby Davis in the NDP. Some great, yeah. I mean, we've got there's a number of LGBT candidates, and you don't even need to be LGBT, gay, lesbian, bi, or trans to support this bill. I mean, hey, we got John Baird from the Conservative Party, but we'll see what the new government looks like. There's a lot of, and then we'll reassess, and we'll get either the Liberals and then just to share with you in Toronto Centre. Bob Ray Toronto Centre was a co-sponsor. We've got Olivia Chow on this side, Jack Layton on that side. We've got some supporters in Toronto, and that's in the GTA. And, we're going to move on that once we see who's elected and who's not.
Thank you so much for joining us, Susan. It's been a real pleasure and a real treat. And maybe if you could give our listeners that Facebook group address one last time, if people want more information, they know where to go find it.
Well, it's... I was going to look it up, but you came to me so quick. I think it's Trans Pride, Trans Pride, and I think there's a website .ca. It lists who was did you find it?
Just checked it out. Yeah, it's got a maple leaf and the female, male, and trans signs. Cool.
And I would encourage people to go and like that and look and see who voted in favor and who didn't. Mm-hmm. If you want to support transhuman rights, and remember to vote in the upcoming election.
Thank you.
It's all political right now.
Thank you so much, Susan.
Thanks again, Susan, and feel free to come back or call in anytime. We'd be happy to have you if any new developments take place or any other issues you want to talk about, of course.
Well, thank you for having me, giving the space for this conversation. Be delighted to come back and continue the conversation.